So throughout today's session, we're going to talk about, again, people first product leadership. I'm going to define what it means and how you can be a product leader, the style that you can have and develop, and how to put your people first. And so by the end of the session, you'll have a lot of great connections. You'll have some exercises that you can do with your team, and you'll have a foundation of what people first product leadership means. So I'm going to dive us in.
Thanks, Diana. And then as a quick heads up too, feel free to, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, you can type them into the chat. We'll save some time kind of for a little Q&A at the end, but definitely feel free to introduce yourselves as well, where you're calling in from, share your LinkedIn, and excited to jump into it. So thanks, Diana. Back to you.
Yeah, and in the next slide, I actually asked for everybody to do that. So first, I'm going to introduce myself. And so to let you know a bit about me, I have a background in user experience. Actually went to school to get a degree in human-computer interaction because I worked for a startup that was very engineering-led, and our customers weren't really sure, what they were supposed to do with the product. They were marketers, and it was done from an engineering mindset. And so I wanted to understand what was the issue, what was causing our marketing customers to not use this amazing product. And it's basically that they had a different mental model. And I learned about that and the principles behind it by getting a degree in human-computer interaction. I then went into user experience research and had an amazing time. I worked at Salesforce at the really early days and was part of the product team. And that to me was just a bringing together a lot of amazing elements of my background. I'd grown up in Silicon Valley. I knew about technology. That's what I was passionate about. That's what I'd loved. I studied business. I knew about how I wanted to be able to bring something to market, how to segment the customers, and how to be able to work cross-functionally with individuals. And then I had this user experience background too, and it brought it all together. And so when I worked in UXR and the product team at Salesforce, I was looking at what the product managers were doing with the insight I gave them. And I'm like, why can't I do that too? And so I pivoted into product management and have been a product manager since then. So I really like the opportunity to bring together multiple cross-functional aspects of my background. That's what led me into product management, and I've been feeling it's a similar case for a lot of you too. So exactly as was highlighted before, I'd love you guys to be able to introduce yourselves. So in the chat, please include a bit about your location. I always think it's fun to include a fun fact about yourself, something that you don't necessarily tell everybody, but you want to share just to, start off the day on a fun note. In your LinkedIn or your link of choice to be able to connect would be great to include as well. And then something that delighted you recently, something that caught you off guard, something that made you smile. And so if you can include that in the chat, that would be great. So just give a couple seconds for folks to be able to do that if they haven't done so already. If you haven't included a fun fact about yourself, drop it in. It'd be a great way just for us to all connect and get to know each other better. Cool. All right. I'm going to keep us going and let that continue in the chat. So one of the things about me is I really like quotes. I think they do an amazing job summarizing an idea that we have in our heads. And so these ones, even though they're both sports analogies, I still think they really apply to product management. Because when you're thinking about the type of leader that you want to be, Vince Lombardi's quote really comes together and highlights that you can become a leader. You don't have to be grown as a leader from, the way that you were born per se. You can develop those skills over time. And I think that's really important to highlight, and we'll dive into that more. But the reason being is that individuals used to think you had to be a certain type of person, you had to speak a certain way, you had to act a certain way in order to be a leader. And that's no longer the case. People really appreciate the authenticity when you show up as you. And I think that's one of the key characteristics that differentiates leaders today is they show up as themselves. They acknowledge where they need assistance. They work collaboratively with their teams. They are themselves. And I think that really separates leaders today from those of the past where, they didn't want people to speak up. They wanted everybody to follow the party line. Now we're seeing a lot more diversity. We're seeing a lot more innovation as a result, and we're seeing a lot more growth. And so I really love Vince Lombardi's coaching comment because it helps you understand that you can become a leader by exercising your superpowers, what makes you stand out. And the other piece that pulls it all together is a quote from Wayne Gretzky, because as a leader, as a product leader specifically, you can never just focus on today. You always need to be thinking about the future. Where is that puck going to go? And so by being a leader who's authentic, you can guide your team to feel comfortable, to stretch themselves, to experiment, to make mistakes, and to be able to do so because they know that you have their back. So you're helping them to grow today, but you're also enabling them to be able to stretch and achieve greatness in the future too, because they know you have their back when they're trying new things, when they're experimenting, and even when they're making mistakes. So how do you bring this all together? How do you become that leader that you want to be? And this may be a model that folks are familiar with, because the double diamond model is a popular framework for product discovery. And it helps product teams to be able to approach problems and solutions by diverging, starting broad, and then enabling creative collaboration, and then converging. So narrowing and bringing together one or two key areas to focus upon. And that structure really helps when defining user problems and helping people to not just jump into a solution. It also really works well for product leadership too, because it helps you empower your teams. It allows you to be creative, allows you to collaborate, and allows you to create an iterative process as you go through each step of your product leadership journey and coach your teams throughout. So the best way to do that is to allow the product managers to be able to have that freedom to explore and to experiment. But just as the double diamond does, you also need to bring them back together to be able to focus the learning, to be able to plan for the future. And as product folks are very curious by nature, you want to be able to build that creativity, but you also want to do so in a way that's focused, that's driving toward a goal that aligns with your company's strategy, as well as the goals and KPIs that you have from a product perspective to enable your company's goal to be realized. So the double diamond approach really helps to bring all that together to allow that creativity to thrive, but also to enable you to focus it on the objectives that are top for your company and obviously for your customers too. So to dive into a little bit more, how I do product leadership from that people first perspective is, again, following that double diamond. So the first point is to think about yourself as a leader. As I said, there used to be a certain type of mindset, a certain type of school, a certain way of speaking. That was how someone led. But now leaders can be much more authentic. They can be themselves. They can bring their background. They can truly come through as individuals who are unique and have their own characteristics. And so that discovery of what makes you a product leader is one of the key characteristics, because it allows you to be authentic. Once you've learned more about yourself, then you can dive in and help to define how you can lead your product team. And again, because we're all unique, how we manage our product team is different. There are different skills and opportunities that you bring to your team based on your background and your experience. And so defining how you want to lead your team is very reflective of you and the leadership style that you discovered. You bring that discover and that define together to be able to develop your team. And you can do so in a hybrid way. You can do so in a remote way. You can do so in a people first method when you're back to the office. So a lot of the activities that you can do when you develop your team doesn't matter where they are. You can bring them together in any context and allow them to come together effectively. And ultimately, as all product people do, we want to deliver. And so you're delivering an empowered product team. So you can think about it as a product manager, you deliver a product. You go through these steps and you deliver a product. As a product leader, your end product is your team. They are what you are delivering. And so you want to ensure that you create an environment where they can be able to show up, they can learn, they can help bring the company to success and also help success for themselves and for the customers too. So you bring together all these pieces, it helps you to develop and puts you in a place where you can help ensure that your company and your product people have the opportunity to shine.
And then Diana, a quick question too. When you think of not just the double diamond, concept and everything there, is there like an ideal size, organization size or product team size where this is most effective, whether it's maybe like a 2-person product team, right? Or something as big as Salesforce with hundreds and thousands of people, or is it just applicable across the board?
Yeah, so I've led product teams that are 50 people. I've led product teams that are 20 people. I've led product teams that are somewhere in between. And this approach works regardless of the size. And it does because you're looking at the people. And so even if you've got a small team of 2 people, you still need to figure out them. And you still need to be able to be an authentic leader to them. When you have a bigger team, you obviously have more opportunity to empower the folks who work directly for you and then enable them to bring that insight to the individuals who work for them. But you still need to show up in a manner that's authentic. You need to understand yourself as a leader and also understand what your team needs from you. So it works regardless of the size of team that you're leading. And I've done it at a bunch of different size product companies and found that it works effectively. Cool. So going to dive into Discover, which is the first step. And so one of the first things you want to do is figure out your leadership voice. And so I'll be honest, there isn't one right way to have that voice. Some people are very outspoken and extroverts. Other people are introverts and they listen first. And so I'll give some guidance based on me. I'm not an extrovert. I'm an introvert. And so thus you'll see the hint there. You don't need to be loud to lead. And that's very true because I think one of the facets of leadership, and again, transcends the size of product team that you're leading, is you really need to listen. Because if all you're doing is talking, you're not enabling the great ideas from your team to surface. But I will say that there isn't one right way to listen. Instead, great leaders adapt the way that they listen. They understand and get to know the person who's speaking to them. They get to understand what those individuals are trying to accomplish and to be able to meet their needs. So even though you might be the most outspoken person and the best extrovert out there, I also recommend spending time listening and getting to understand your team and really engaging in the conversation that you're having with them so that you can pick up how you can best help them, some areas that they may not be bringing to life that they really need some coaching on, and how you can most effectively enable them to grow. And so again, there isn't one right way to listen. You need to understand the patterns of your team. You need to be able to adjust your approach based on the individuals that you're speaking with and get an understanding of them. And that will help you enable them to become the best they can be, but also ensure that you're listening effectively in a manner that really shows that you understand and get the person that you're speaking to on your team. So one of the things I would say is great leaders, as I highlighted, have different listening styles, and they don't just have one style that they apply to everyone. You need to be able to understand more about your team. You need to be able to understand, again, what makes them tick? What are some problems that they might be facing? What are unique to the individuals that you're speaking with right now? And so that's why I conclude that second bullet. You really want to think about the situation that you're in, because you may find that, when someone's doing a lot of talking, you may listen more, and that's fine. But you also want to ensure that you find the right moment to be able to help guide them and to be able to focus them. You also want to ensure that you understand what is needed from your team. There may be some times where they just need to offload, and thus you let them talk. There may be times where they need your guidance, and so you need to interject more. So that's why I said you really need to listen to your team, listen to the person that you're speaking with, because they may need different things from you. And by understanding those different aspects of what they're seeking from you, you can listen in the most effective way and consequently be able to provide help and guidance to them in a way that really reflects that you were engaged and you understand what they're seeking. So, building on that theme, I really think one of the ways to listen best is to engage in the conversation, and you engage by asking questions. You want to frame the questions as an opportunity to learn. I know that there's a lot of leaders out there who feel, as a leader, you should have all the answers. I don't believe that's true. We're all growing. We're all learning. We've brought amazing people to our team. Why don't we learn from them? And so there may be questions that arise that you have the answers to, but others on your team don't. But they may not feel comfortable for whatever reason to raise them. So think about your team and don't feel awkward raising questions. Encourage learning by putting a question out there. That often breaks the ice and helps other people put forward questions too. And I said, and I'll say it again, you as a leader don't need to have all the answers. You can encourage your team to collaborate. You can encourage your team to provide answers themselves, to coach them to be able to be self-sufficient. And as doing so, you'll gain more trust in them and you. And then creating that environment where people feel comfortable to ask questions, you allow curiosity to really come to the front. And that's important because, as I shared before, as product people, we're curious. We like to understand why. We like to understand our customers. We like to understand what makes things tick. And by asking questions, we can really learn. And so by creating that space where people feel comfortable to ask questions, you're opening up an environment where your team can learn from each other and gain comfort in speaking up, as well as solving problems together with your advice and guidance, helping them to do even better. So again, as a leader, you don't need to have all the answers, and it really helps if you listen, because then that ensures that you're providing the guidance to your team that they need at the time that they need it, but also ensures that you're stepping back and understanding when they want to be able to shine too. So bringing all that together, you may wonder, why do I need to put questions out there? Shouldn't my team just feel comfortable doing so? And I wish that was the case, but it's honestly not. I put that stat up here because it's really big and it's really important. 82% of people suffer from imposter syndrome. And what that means is that they may not feel comfortable stepping up. They may not feel comfortable putting a question out there. So by seeing you as a leader, asking questions, being curious, listening and engaging, they know that it's okay to do so as well. And with product people, one thing that I know you all have in the back of your minds is we're covering a lot of different facets. As you saw from my background, we're looking at product from a lens of technology and business and customer. And there are a lot of different things that we need to explore, often ones that we don't have a lot of knowledge of. And that's just how we build new innovations. And so there's often a lot of uncertainty in what we do. And so we're constantly questioning, do I have the insight? Am I the right person to do this? Is there a better way to do it? And so oftentimes you will find that product people feel like imposters. And so keep this stat in mind when you're working with your team, because you want to think about ways, again, that you can help them feel comfortable, even when they're uncertain. And by being understanding and being sympathetic, you can help encourage them to stretch, and you can help them, embrace that uncertainty and embrace the imposter syndrome that they likely feel. So you may think imposter syndrome, that sounds like a pretty bad thing. We should overcome it. We should outgrow it. But I'd like you to know you really don't. And especially as a product person, again, we're always experimenting, always looking at new things. And if we weren't, we're just iterating and building on something that someone else created before us. But as product folks, we're always trying to introduce something new. We're always trying to bring surprise and delight to our customers. And that doesn't mean repeating something that again and again that's already out there. That means doing something different, doing something in a different way, and diving into uncertainty. And so I really do think people should embrace their imposter syndrome, partly because you can realize you're not alone. As that stat highlighted before, 82% of people are and have felt that they're imposters. So I encourage people to embrace that fear, that uncertainty, and that doubt, because that pushes you to do even more. It pushes you to work collaboratively. It pushes you to be able to bring together all those disparate views to be able to identify something new and something exciting and something that will delight our customers. So don't try to outgrow, or don't try to tell your team, don't worry, you're not imposters. It's okay. If you've got that doubt, embrace it. Allow it to fuel you to become even better. So thinking about bringing it all together, think about how you can reframe your thoughts. As I said, imposter syndrome is there. It exists, especially in product people. Don't worry about that. When your fear arises, you can become aware of it and become aware of it in your team as well by listening to it and listening to them and being able to help coach them through those sessions or those times where they may feel uncertain. But also think of it from the lens of yourself. If you've made mistakes, that's okay. Embrace it. Put it out there. Don't dwell on it. Instead of saying, I'm a leader, I cannot make mistakes, let your team know that you're human. And then that will help them rise up and share and learn from mistakes as well. And when you make a mistake, celebrate it. Celebrate the learning. When you make a success, celebrate it. Because you want to take those moments to be able to allow your team to know that you acknowledge them, that you've seen what they've done. And you want to be able to bring that excitement to the rest of the organization too. Often product people will just dive in and keep on going. So you as a leader, a lot of it is on you to raise and celebrate their successes. And you can also bring together the people around you to be able to help overcome and control that uncertainty that people have. It will always exist. But again, if you create an environment where people feel comfortable to be able to try new things, they won't feel that they need to hide how they feel. They won't feel that they need to be safe. They'll feel that they can stretch and they can try new things and they can surprise you as a result of the opportunities that they come up with. Because again, they feel safe to be able to experiment because they know that you've got their back. So one of the exercises that I wanted to bring to you all and a way to learn more about your team is called a README. And you may have heard of it as a personal OS, different terms that are out there, but I call it a README. And what you can do is you can gather information from your team members. I've done this in PowerPoint slides. I've done this in Figma. I've done it in Google Docs. It depends on what you use at your company, but you share this. So you have everybody in your product team create a README. And then when you're about to meet someone new or you're working with someone that you haven't worked with for a while, you reference the README and you get a really great insight into what makes them tick and how to work best with them and how to bring their superpowers to light. So an exercise that I recommend you all bring to your teams is to be able to run this README. So I'm going to keep on going into define. And so from define, you want to be able to determine how you're going to lead your product team. And just as I said, there isn't one right way to discover to be a leader. There isn't one right way to lead a product team. And I know that's probably counter to a lot of what you guys have said. You know, I've got a framework, I must follow that framework. But do believe that you need to be authentic to you. Because again, if you try to be a type of leader that you're not, then your team's going to suss it out. So again, by discovering your leadership style and your leadership voice and how you lead and what your team needs from you, you can bring it all together to be the best leader for your team so you can define your leadership style. So, as I said before, leaders are no longer the same. And so when you think about the leadership style that you want to create, so you want to define your leadership style, remember again that you don't need to be like the leaders of the past. You can be the leader that's right for you. And so think about, what you've learned. Think about the experience you have. Remember why the company hired you. It's for you. And it's for the abilities that you bring. It's not because of someone who they had and thought that they might have, replicated. You can't clone people. They hired you for you. And so remember that and bring your true self to work and to leading your team. So you think about leadership and the type of leader you want to be. I often find that leaders confuse leadership and management. So when you're defining your leadership style, think about the type of leader that you want to be, but ensure that you're focusing on leadership skills, not just management. And so Grace Hopper, who is one of the pioneers in computer technology, she has this amazing quote when you think about the difference between leadership and management. You manage things, you lead people. So as a leader, you want to be leading people. You can see the coaching, you can see the mentoring, all of those facets that wrap up and empower people. There are obviously aspects of your job that is management, managing those things, but leadership is much broader and encompasses more than management. Leadership is about the people and what makes them tick and how we can empower the people that we work with and the teams that we lead. So when you think about how you want to define your leadership style, recall this chart and ensure that you're stepping into that leadership realm. Push yourself into being a leader, not just managing your team. And as we talk about different types of leadership, I also think it's important to remember that there are product evolutions in the type of product people that were expected as well. So when you're thinking about how you want to define your leadership style, don't get stuck in the past. It used to be that product people, had a very narrow insight into a lot of different areas and then went deep. But that's no longer the case. Because of the changes that are happening around us, we have to become much more like octopuses. And so as the workforce becomes more diverse and dispersed, as accelerators and boot camps and platforms have emerged, access to skills and learning has opened up. And there's a wealth of information around us. So it's now expected that product leaders will have deeper knowledge in a wider range of skills and experiences. So we're no longer going to be specialists. We're expected to be generalists and have knowledge in a lot of different areas. But you may say, I work at a certain company, I work in healthcare, I work in education. Yes, you can be a specialized generalist. You can have a specialization in education or in mathematics or a different realm, but you are going to be much broader given the asks of product teams today. One is never expected to stop learning. And so as a product leader, remember that you're going to be asked to be broader than you ever expected to be. And so again, you need to coach your teams to feel comfortable stretching and learning and growing as well, because our customers' expectations are constantly changing. So we need to change with them too. And you need to be able to adapt and learn. And that's uncomfortable for some folks. They come into a new company, they have a specific way that they've done things, and they want to do that again. But there's often an opportunity to unlearn, to do something different. And again, that will allow you to grow and also to become more knowledgeable, but in a way that's broader than where we used to be from a product perspective. So, as I've talked about before, bringing it together in leadership, I think, again, as you define your leadership style, it's very important to focus on the psychological safety within your team. And I know it may sound counterintuitive. We're talking about people first, but in order for people to feel comfortable, to really feel like they can be themselves, and for you to truly be okay and define your leadership style in a way that empowers your team, you need to create that space where they can feel comfortable, to be able to speak up, to be able to make mistakes, and to be able to know that you've got their back. And so a story that I wanted to share, because I really think it's empowering, is one from Google. And so when we think of Google, we think of all the amazing successes, all the things that they've done that have changed the landscape of the internet today. And so you think all those people must be amazing. Well, actually, some are more amazing than others. And so there was a study that Google did to understand what made those really successful teams, the ones that were succeeding even more than others, what made them stand out. And, the teams across Google, they were dependable, there was structure and clarity, they knew what they were focusing on, they had meaning in their work, they were all delivering impact. But the ones that stood out above and beyond the others, they focused on psychological safety. And what that meant is that they were sharing. When they made a mistake, they were sharing it. They weren't hiding it. They weren't keeping it inside. They were sharing it with their team. And so the same mistake didn't get made again. And that's key, because the other teams, brilliant people, amazing people, but they were sharing nothing. They weren't sharing their mistakes. They were keeping them inside. And so others would make the same mistake again and again and again. But the teams that were succeeding above and beyond the others, they were sharing their mistakes. They were sharing that learning so that everybody got to be able to understand, learn from the mistake, and move on. They didn't make it again. And so again, when you think about defining your leadership style and how you want to be, I think it's really important to consider psychological safety because you want to create a space where your team feels comfortable to make mistakes, to raise those mistakes so that the knowledge across your whole entire team grows. And again, this applies to any size of team. So another thing to keep in mind is psychological safety. Maybe you don't like the phrase, it's something that kind of makes you cringe. That's okay. But think about the jobs to be done. And that's the principle that defines product management. What is our customer job to be done? Well, that job to be done doesn't stay the same. It changes. And as a result, we need to feel comfortable to change, to evolve, to try new things. And if you try new things, you're going to make mistakes. So again, you need to create a space where individuals feel comfortable sharing those mistakes and being able to try new things so that we can exceed our customer expectations instead of delivering the same thing again and again, even though the customer's expectations have evolved. So another exercise you can try with your team is to see, how do they feel about psychological safety? Do they feel that they have psychological safety today? So what you can do with this exercise is, as you can see on the left, is you can have your team map out where they felt a year ago, where they feel today, and where they want to be. You want your team to feel that they have a lot of drive, a lot of ambition, and are psychologically safe to be able to do so. You want them to be in that performance quadrant. But run this exercise with your team and see where they've been, see where they are, and see where they want to go to. There may be work to do. And so as we get to the end of the talk, we wrap up with develop and deliver. And so with develop and deliver, one of the things that I think is really important, and you can probably tell a theme throughout, is learning. You want to make sure that your team has time to learn. And so when you're applying all these practices and bringing them all together, you can paraphrase from some of the great thought leaders out there in the product space. As a product leader, it's your responsibility to help create a culture where your team can focus on the right things. And that means they have a time to learn. If they're just building features and they're a feature factory, they won't have that time to experiment and to learn what their customers are really seeking. And our friend Marty Kagan brings up, you want to ensure that they have the opportunity to solve problems, that they're looking towards outcomes, not outputs. If they're just building a feature and another feature and another feature, they're not solving a problem. They're just checking something off a list. And you need to create that environment that allows your team to learn, to be able to develop and deliver a product that's effective for their customers and product that's effective for themselves too. And so one of the things you are, as we've highlighted, is a leader. One of your main capacities is as a coach. So how do you develop that and deliver that culture for your product team that they can be great? And so if you haven't read it, definitely recommend Bill Campbell's book. He's an amazing coach, from a lot of the Silicon Valley leaders, and he really helps focus in on leadership, not management. So one of the things that people wonder about, okay, times are tight today. I'll think about all of this in the future. But I do want to change that way of thinking, because right now is when you have a lot of opportunities to enable your team to thrive. And even though the market may seem tough, and it is, there are opportunities out there, and people will leave for those opportunities. Or to be honest, they may stay and just shut down. You know the phrase quiet quitting. You don't want that in your team. You want your team to continue to deliver. And so if you're thinking they'll just be here because they don't have another opportunity to go to, that's the wrong way to lead your team. You want to be able to bring them to a place that they want to show up, that they want to be able to stretch and grow. And so again, by developing, delivering an empowered team, you can provide an opportunity for them to continue to develop their skills and learn, and thus have a higher likelihood that they'll stay with you. And so the 5 different facets that I recommend including in a learning culture is you want to allow your team to learn from past experiences. You want to allow them to learn from others. You want to be able to transfer that knowledge across the team. So think about the ways that you structure your week during the product group. Do you have opportunities to cross-pollinate learning? Do you have opportunities to come together and share? And then on the bottom facet, what are they sharing? What are they talking about? What are they learning from each other? The experiments that they've run, the way that they've approached problems. So using these 5 different areas, it helps you to create a forum of opportunity for your team to be able to shine. And the way to do so is to think about how you structure your week. And so as product people, we tend to have a lot of activities, meetings, etc. throughout the week. Think about that week. And then an exercise I recommend running with your team is to break down that week. How do they feel it goes? Are there things that they want to continue doing? Are there certain meetings that are really fruitful? Are there meetings that they want to stop? Some activities, status reports, etc., that they think are just not helpful, that you want to stop doing? Are there other ways that you want to share knowledge that you should bring to light and start doing? And maybe things that haven't fit in the other characteristics. So even though you often run retrospectives as part of an end of product release cycle, you can run it with your team too, to be able to help identify changes that you can make. For example, to make time to learn. And so I've run these exercises with different sizes of teams, and there were some meetings that we got rid of, but there are also some meetings that we introduced. We did retain our Monday product team alignment, where everybody got together, gave a quick update on what they're doing, typically over Slack. There's some pieces that are gaps that we highlight and talk about in the Monday product team call. Wednesdays are a great time to share research and insights that would benefit all the different teams. And then on Friday, we had an hour of learning. So we brought everybody together to learn about new topics. So again, think about how your week is structured. Do you have opportunities where you bring together your product team? Do you have opportunities for them to share knowledge, to share experiments, to share learning? If not, do a retrospective. See if there are ways that you can adjust the calendars so that there is more time to learn. So hours of learning are definitely something I recommend. Again, an exercise that you can run with your team. You can have talks about competition. You can get to know each other. You can have a book club that you read, a couple chapters each week, and then share them. You can do retrospectives with a template that I shared earlier in the deck. Someone went to a conference, they can share what they did at the conference. You can also have different parts of the business share. So just some ideas about how you can structure that hour of learning, and definitely recommend trying it with your team. It's a great way to help ensure that they're constantly learning. And again, by constantly learning, you have a higher likelihood of retaining the talent on your team. So bringing it all together, we talked about how to discover your leadership voice. How do you want to define your leadership style, building on your characteristics of your voice, what type of leader you are. And then you want to apply that to be able to develop and deliver an empowered product team. So again, all of this comes together to create a people-first product leadership team. And that benefits not just your team, but also benefits the organization. The team's going to feel empowered. They're going to be excited to show up to work. They're going to feel that you have their back and that they're trusted. That's going to benefit the organization based on the employees feeling that they have an opportunity. The groups that you work with, the cross-pollination that you provide, they're going to benefit too. So you're going to be able to continue to refine and continue to improve collaboratively together. And so that's going to help the groups across the organization thrive. And you, as a product leader, as you see your team be able to stretch and to grow and to try to experiment, that's going to feel pretty cool for you too. So you can also thrive. So just want to wrap it up by saying you've got this. I know being a product leader is tricky. There's a lot of things to consider, but you've really got this. Just be true to you. Be the leader that you can be. Don't be the leader that someone else told you you should be. Be the leader that's you and right for you. And if you want to follow up with me to learn more about me or to talk to me more about any of the areas that I covered today, you can snap the QR code or you can just follow me on LinkedIn. So thank you very much for the time today. I hope this talk has given you more insight into what People First Product Leadership is and how you too can become a People First Product Leader. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks so much, Diana. And if anyone has any questions, obviously feel free to type it into the chat, or I think everyone, you should be able to unmute yourself. So I had one question that someone actually had messaged me. Maybe they meant to do it to all chat. But when you look at product-led organizations, right, versus like sales-led organizations, I think as many product leaders in the room, whether you've managed a team or whether you're an individual contributor, I'm sure we've gotten those kind of late night feature requests or changes and saying, hey, the sales team says we need this, right? Or they promised a feature that frankly, is not in the pipeline or we haven't built. So do you feel it's more difficult being a product leader in one versus the other? Or how do you kind of coach your teams to adapt the challenges when maybe sales or marketing or the rest of the organization isn't always aligned with what the product team's doing?
Yeah, and I've worked at product-led growth companies that were more B2C. I've worked at enterprise companies that are more B2B. And I would say in a B2B environment, being a strong leader is even more important, because as you said, you have sales who's representing the customer. You've got marketing who's representing the customer. Everybody's trying to represent the customer. And so you need to ensure that the product folks know that you have their backs so that they can share the customer insight. They can help work with their cross-functional stakeholders on prioritization, that they've got the opportunity to be able to really focus on the top jobs that need to be done. And so I think it's even more important in a B2B environment. And when you're in a B2C environment or a product-led growth opportunity, you tend to be more product-led, which means the product folks have more access to the customers. And so it might be, quote, a little bit easier, but then on the flip side, you have much more customer insight coming through the product team. And so again, you have to do that prioritization, you have to do the balancing. So there are different challenges that they face. And again, different type of way that you may want to show up, but you want to ensure you're helping your team have that opportunity to put forward what they think is right, to be able to reinforce why they're prioritizing in a certain way, and to back that up with customer insight. So you're ultimately getting to the same place, but you may need to empower your team slightly differently to work effectively with cross-functional teams. When you're more B2B, when it's more B2C, you may have that opportunity to do things more directly.
Great. That's perfect. Any other questions that anyone has? And otherwise, the recording and details will also be shared out. So please feel free to connect with Diana, directly on LinkedIn or view her link there. And thanks for joining. And we're happy to share some more information here. So we'll give everyone some time back and enjoy the rest of your days.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks, everyone.
Diana. Cheers, everybody.